Gotta get a mapper. Gotta get a mapper. Oh yes, gotta get a mapper. Or something like that. I think that was the song we used to sing at the Academy for Cartography. Gotta get a mapper. No. Hello, my name is Guy, and today we are looking at the second circle and what we can be expecting from second circle learning this year. So here is the outline. This is what we're going to be unpacking throughout the entire year. We're going to start, we've got today's video, which is on mapping and setting and what to avoid whilst doing that. But then we jump into, we've got structure, basis for everything. We've been talking about structure in circle one. Now we start to really look at how it's going to help us, how it's going to be just that much more useful moving forward. We're going to look at story. How do we use and advance that sentence that we've been talking about? How do we really push that forward? Hooks. Arr, I got a hook. Arr, har, har. We don't actually have any pirates on the faculty at the moment, but nonetheless, maybe, who knows, in the future. We're going to be looking at hooks. What kind of hooks can we use? How do we get them? How do we use them? How to make them useful? Villains, we're going to really unpack that. Demonos is going to take us through some really interesting stuff on that one. NPCs, Alad Senior, bless his little heart. He's going to be talking to us about NPCs and how to really get the most out of them. Encounter dynamics. Interesting, and you can bet your bottom dollar that I don't know what Professor Bjorn is going to be talking to us about on that one. Design versus PCs. So often we don't design with the PCs in mind, and when we do, what should we be designing for? Geography of encounters. Old Jonathan Swift is back from his adventures at sea to talk all about how we can map out our encounters and more, of course. Rewards. What really are rewards within the role-playing space, and how should we be handling them and using them to tell a better story? Caring. This is not an outreach. Well, kind of it is, actually. How do we build investment in our game on a much stronger level than we did in first circle? And then we review. As usual, we try and understand just what it is that we've been doing. I'm being tangled up here. What we've been doing for the past year, and how can we make it just that much better? So, let's go straight into it. Maps. What can we expect from today? Today, we're going to be talking about maps, what to avoid whilst doing maps. We're going to talk about setting. We're going to talk about what to avoid when doing setting. Now, it's fundamental for us to understand that when we talk about maps, we have world maps, we have solar system maps, we have galaxy-wide maps, we have little itsy-bitsy maps of the inside of a small tower in the middle of nowhere. Maps span a huge amount of space, and it's important to realize which is the right size for us to start with. And at second circle, I think you'll be surprised about that. What should we avoid when we're designing maps? There's a whole bunch of stuff in there that we should definitely avoid. Hard geography is one of them. Setting is important. Where do we get it from? How do we get it? And how much do we need to do in order to actually have setting? You'll be surprised. It's a very small amount. And then, of course, what to avoid, because we should always avoid doing things that don't make sense. So, let's get into things. Maps of everything for everything. We've already spoken about that. So let's jump into it. Functional local area. When you start your game, we're not talking campaign here. We're just starting a game. We just want to have fun. This is second circle. We are here to explore role-playing, not the minutiae of gigantic campaign construction. We need a local area, and I generally will make an area as far as can be traveled in a week. Depending on the system, of course, this determines how far away it should be. So if it is, a starship can travel in a week, 5 light years, 50 light years, that's as far as I'll take it. Any further than that, and I'm wasting my time at this level. We really don't need to go much further than that. So if it's fantasy, how far can a horse fly? Or how far... How far can a horse gallop, or how far can a griffin fly, I should really say. And that's, of course, carrying coconut. Now, the idea here is that we are going to have to start somewhere, and this is a pretty good scale at which to start. A lot of people jump in and try to make world maps, and they get confused, and then they get over. There's so much of the world that we have to create, and when you try and create a world map at the scale of Earth, you suddenly realize how big Earth is, and the fact that there are thousands of maps. It's too much. So then we kind of get pushed away from that. So I always say within a week's travel, that's the size of the map. You're going to add into that map. So you go, okay, I want a map, and I've got some forest, and I've got a river, and I've got this, and I've got that, and I've got, yeah, okay, fine. Add in some key inspirational points. Don't tell me what they are when you add them in. Put a cave into the mountains that you've drawn. Put a giant tree into the trees that you've drawn, or a big circle where there are no trees in the middle of the forest. Have the river make a funny shape, or spell a word, perhaps. I don't know. Add in curious things. How many curious things should you add in? If you're making a map that you can travel a week in all directions, I would have a curious thing per day that you could travel. How far can you travel in a day? Well, use the rule system. They'll tell you how far you can go, generally within the specified parameters of the rule set that you're going to be using. So I would add in one thing per day, at least, that allows you to go, well, if they went in this direction for a day. You don't have to create concentric circles on your map of things. That doesn't make sense. But within a day, here is something that's curious. Within another day of that, over there is something that's curious. And expand from there. And then, useful locations. So often this happens. We don't anticipate how humans move around the world. And principally, the Romans will help us with this. But the idea is that the locations should be useful for PCs if they are in an environment that has human habitation, generally speaking, or aliens, or whatever race you're using. Generally speaking, within a week's travel, there should be several points along that space where there is a safe space, a cave, a village, a hamlet, a single lookout station orbiting a planet, unless they are in absolute desolation. And even then, natural phenomenon can be used to make useful locations for the PCs. It's important that the PCs understand this. It really is useful for you to be able to grapple with this fact, so that the PCs don't look at it and go, well, we can't ever leave. We just can't, we'd never survive. Put them in the middle of the Sahara Desert without anything useful, and they're going to struggle. They really are. Mr. Swift.
The important thing to bear in mind with a map is that your players are going to look at it. Whether or not they should is up to you, but they're going to look at that map, and they're going to look for the unusual, the things that stand out as being points of interest, if you like. That's probably where they're going to head. So if you have got a few points of interest, you can sort of vaguely work out where they're going to go. They might also avoid those areas completely, in which case then having those helping points are really going to be useful in terms of navigating the players around your map. Now, the other thing to bear in mind is that when you are designing a map, it doesn't matter how big a scale it is that by placing natural barriers in certain areas, rivers, dark nebula, you choose what is appropriate, obviously, for the map. I mean, you can't just put elephants on a map if there are no elephants. We've learnt that one. But the idea is that by constraining with mountain ranges, rivers, and the like, you can really control the flow that the players' characters are going to go in. And that's something that's fairly important when designing maps, is to work out the flow they're going to go in, and then sort of add things to it that they're likely to encounter as they go on that journey. And that's particularly useful when creating maps or anything, really.
Yes, so there you have that. What should we avoid concerning maps? Look at those three things and be shocked. Thinking too hard. Logic and illogic. Now, when we try and draw a map, we go, oh, okay, there's a mountain over there, so there should be a river that flows down here, and there should be a this, and there should be a that, and there should be the next thing. There are many YouTube videos and YouTube channels out there that do a remarkably wonderful job of explaining how to do maps accurately with accurate geography. And I would suggest you go and look at those if you want that kind of tutorial on how to do these things. As far as I'm concerned, no one cares. Well, at least if they do, not so much. And even on our own planet, we have inconsistencies where the laws of gravity, where all kinds of things just don't work so well. And, well, they're still here. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is don't overthink your map. Jot down things, scribble it if you need to. Draw circles to say, well, there's a forest over here, and there's a thing over here, and there's a thing over there, and the river does a thing like that, and there we go, we're done. Obviously, if you have floating islands, you need to have floating islands everywhere. Makes sense. Or is it just one specific area where there's floating islands? Floating islands are perfectly explainable, so we need logic. And also, those islands float because the people on them believe that their islands float. That's ridiculous. Not if the people who are on that island look down at you whilst the island is floating and say, because we believe the island's floating, the islands float. Just because that's illogic, that doesn't make sense. You go, well, is it magic? No, it's not magic. It's just they believe that they float, so they float. The islands feel compelled to float. What? That doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to make sense. It's part of the adventure. It's part of the story. We're going to see why. Look, explain later. Draw now, explain later. This, I feel, should be the most important thing in this entire session. Do not be constrained by trying to explain everything now. Do not have to figure out the basic mechanics. Well, this mountain's 6 miles high and doesn't erode. Why? Don't care. I'll explain it later. If it ever comes up that a character who happens to be a geologist ever asks the actual question in game, why is that mountain there? It's infuriating when players say, well, that map doesn't work, it doesn't make sense. To you, as someone who is educated and has access to Google Maps, in which case I can probably show you where on Google Maps this exact phenomenon is happening on this planet as we speak. But the characters don't know that. And as long as the world believes it to be true, it will be true. So, accurate geography, don't stress over it. Don't have to work out the high tide, low. That's 5th, 6th, 7th circle world creation. It really is. So many young GMs, and by young I don't mean as in a 12-year-old versus a 50-year-old, as in someone who's only been role-playing for a couple of weeks or days or hours or months or years. A young GM, often this is where they get, oh, I don't draw maps because they're so complicated. You've got to know so much. You don't. You really don't. You don't. Just have fun. Have fun. So avoid being stuck here. Draw the map and then explain it later if you really need to, which you don't, by the way. So, setting. Now we've got our map. We have our map. Do we start with the map or do we start with the setting first? It's a chicken and egg kind of story. We have to start somewhere, so if you are a map kind of person and a map is going to help you, inspire you to tell better stories, go for it, make the map first. If you are a settings kind of person, you want your setting to make more sense and then the map to be based off of that setting, it doesn't matter. Either way will work, as long as you actually do either of these things first and then the second one second. Right, so it's a rough space. It's not, I know the colour of the teacup in the room of the Duchess in the county of Ghent, and that's it. I've got that kind of level of detail. It really doesn't need to be that much. Again, what a lot of people feel is that they have to have all of this stuff beforehand. They have to have it all beforehand, and then they don't start, or they start creating all of the stuff. They never get to actually playing. So pre-owned or generated, pre-generated or your own. Pre-generated settings, Star Trek, Harry Potter, Star Wars, Forgotten Realms, all of these kinds of wonderful places. Yes, go and explore them, go and use them. There's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't. Make your own. Absolutely. Why not? It's a massive task either way. If you go with pre-generated, your players might know more about the world than you do. If you go and play a Star Trek game with me, for example, I know a lot about Star Trek. Let's go and play Doctor Who. I don't know very much about Doctor Who, so you can get away with a lot more. So it's a massive task if you use pre-generated. It's a massive task if you want to make your own as well. I will always advocate making your own, however, because it gives you control, and as you're going to see later on, you don't need to refine it to small details at the beginning. That's part of the journey. So take what you need from your settings. So if it's pre-generated, if it's let's say Star Wars, and you go, okay, I wanted during the Empire and the Rebellion are busy fighting, and that's a cool time. Okay, fine, great, wonderful. Only take what you need. Do you need to know the name of the admiral who's in charge of the 12th Fleet of the Outer Rim? No, because the entire campaign or the entire adventure takes place on Coruscant. Okay, great. You don't have to worry about that. Let's just worry about Coruscant, and let's just worry about the specific area in Coruscant. So take what you need. Now, broad strokes, it's always broad strokes. The PCs are never going to get it all at once. They're not going to sit down and just get everything. They're not going to get in session 1, game 1, adventure 1. Okay, we ride around the entire kingdom looking in through every single door. What do we see? Never going to happen. Never, ever going to happen. And if it does, yeah, you've got a different type of player. So you have time to explore, to go and add detailing to your world, to unpack things and say, right, I need to add in a this, or I need to add in a I need this, or I need that. Develop as you go along. It's part of the joy of going, well, the PCs are going out to that manor next week. I don't have the map yet for that area. I don't even know who runs the manor. I don't know what its income is. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Imagine if you'd pre-generated that yonks ago before the game started and the players are low level and you've generated this manor to have hundreds of gigantically large and powerful creatures because you thought they were only going to get there much, much later on. What are you going to do? Throw away all that work and start again? Or just kill the PCs off because they've made a bad decision? Really doesn't make sense, in my mind anyway, to have this kind of preparation level. So broad strokes, take your time, have fun, and then use the expectations. Expectations and settings. Settings give you expectations. Settings require things, so give it to them. If you're going to play Star Wars, we expect stormtroopers and Jedi and spaceship battles, and it's a trap and all those kinds of wonderful things. Give that to the players. Let them experience that. Make that part of your initial planning. Oh, well, we expect Star Wars battles. Okay, we'll start on a Star Destroyer. Great. There are Daleks running around. Wait. So give them what they expect. Do not, on Adventure 1, suddenly break it. Well, we're playing fantasy, but you've all got starships. You've all got your own starship. What? Huh? How does that work? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Are we playing Spelljammer? Is that the game? Settings come with expectations, so make sure that you give them that expectation. There is obviously a large amount of space, though, for your own interpretation. Professor Creasy. Well, of course, there's the challenge of wanting to make your own, to craft your own world, and to be recognized for the genius that you are, that I am, for example. But there is also the deadly trap that you might suffer from insofar as when you start down the rabbit hole of creating your own world, you want to fulfill every little detail before you start going, and you question everything that you have made. You return to it, you lament over it, you agonize over whether there should be an O at the end of the racial name for the people that live on that little island that no one is likely to visit in 1,000 years. Don't fall into the trap of a pre-generated world seeming boring and dull because someone else made it, or into the trap of making your own and never being able to get out of it. If no one plays in your world and you die, all that's left is some dreary, drab writing. You need it to come alive. That's why we are role-playing. If you enjoy creating these worlds that don't ever get used, knock yourself out, go for it. But for those of us that want to share and be social and for others to enjoy our creations, you have to put it out there. regardless of how finished it might be. Finish it as you go along. That's the joy of this game, is that you don't have to be complete, you don't have to be perfect to be me. Wait, I think we lost track there. Anyway. Hopping mad. Now, what should we avoid when looking at settings? Settings. Mad. Okay, so thinking too hard. We had the same thing for the map. You don't need it all. Avoid creating everything. Let it develop, let it expand and explore it on your own. Some of the fundamental lessons that we will be covering in Circle 3 of Game Mastering is improvisation and enjoying improvisation. It's something that we should look forward to because it allows you to explore this world right next to the player characters. You're not this being that's detached from this world and you kind of set it in motion and watch as it runs out. You want to be part of the game. And this is how we are part of the game. Developing beyond the map. So for now, we don't need to go beyond the map. Don't think about what's the current geopolitical status of the kingdom on the other side of the world? Do you care? And how do you know what exactly the status is? Who have you spoken to? Do you go down to the docks to speak to a sailor who has come in from that part of the world? You do? Okay, good. Let's go and explore that. And we will make it up and discover it as we go along. We will get that sailor to talk about some kingdom. We don't know the name of the kingdom. We'll make it up. We'll just add to it rather than stress over it before the game even starts and then no character ever asks what's happening on the far shores of that territory. It really is about maximizing your time, minimizing your lost creativity, because if you make up stuff and no one ever explores it, who knows about it? It's only really you, and, well, that's pretty much like playing with yourself. It really, really doesn't benefit anybody else. You might enjoy doing it, absolutely fine. But if you don't enjoy doing it, it's a waste of time, wasted effort. So it's about making sure that we give and develop just what we need and no more until we need more, and then we get more. That's the important thing. Really, 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 really focus on what we need, not what we want. A lad?
I never try and think too much. It's sometimes when you try and you come up with all these things, you get to the point where your brain just doesn't know what to do. So it gets kind of stuck and then you can't do anything else because you're stuck on what it is that you're trying to get unstuck on, except that you're stuck on it. So you can't really get off it, if you know what I mean. So usually when trying to come up with things like this, you get stuck on something, walk away. Just, walk away. Well, obviously not in that direction, but, walk away and say, I'm done with this. I'm not going to think very much more on it. I'm going to go have something to eat. Yeah. Don't know why. Anyway, okay, so the challenge for you this week. The challenge. Oh, I hope you are doing these challenges. Let me know in the comments down below, because it does, we've got them planned out for the entire year, so it doesn't really make much of a difference. Anyway, so the challenge for you is to make a map of a region, 1 week's travel in all directions. You're not going to put a label on anything. Leave it blank. Completely blank. Blankety blank face. That's what we want. A blank map. A map. Not a blank map. A map. A map without any names on it. Don't name anything. Don't create anything whilst you're designing the map. If you want a forest, put a forest down. If you want a giant tree in the forest, put a giant tree in the forest. If you want the forest to be moving, draw a mobile forest. Don't name it. Don't think about it. Don't develop it. Don't even plot it. Just do it. You got this. That brings us to the end of today's introduction to Second Circle, as well as to what we were talking about, maps and settings, and how much do you really need in order to be able to launch your game out there. I hope it's been insightful. Remember, you can hit the like button if you did find something useful in this video. Hit that thumbs down button if you really thought this was a waste of your time, because that's ultimately what we don't want to achieve, and we only know that if you do that. And
comments. Leave your comments down below. Really, really leave your comments down below. A reminder, live sessions will be resuming in about a month or so, as soon as I've relocated my sorry self to a different continent and a different part of the world. And then we can start to unpack each of these videos. So look out for that. If you get reminders, hit the subscribe button, of course, and any more information that you could possibly want about the channel, about Patreon and podcasts and books and all that wonderful stuff, www.greatgamemaster.com. Until next time, however, I wish you and yours the very happiest of gaming.
As they go on that journey, and that's particularly useful when creating maps or anything really. Was that right? I mean, did that work? I thought so. I mean, I quite like the elephant bit actually.